Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you with us. I'm Denise Ringler, Director of the Turchin Center for the Visual Arts at Appalachian State University. For the past 18 years, the Turchin Center has proudly partnered with ASU's outdoor programs to present the Appalachian Mountain Photography Competition. This program is truly a cultural treasure for Western North Carolina and beyond, and reflects the Turchin Center's commitment to showcasing and celebrating artists from across our region. Over the past year, COVID-19 has created opportunities for introspection and soul searching, as we've been called upon to think differently about almost everything we do. For those of us at the Turchin Center, this process of reflection has led us to wonder about some questions we'll be exploring through this fascinating panel discussion. What defines the term Appalachian photography? And is that definition changing as our perception of the character and cultural life of our region evolves and changes? What characteristics shape and inform the identity and psyche of Appalachia? Thanks so much for joining us as we explore these questions together through the eyes of the distinguished panelists participating in this session. I'd like to thank the staff of the Turchin Center who worked to present the AMPC exhibition, including Craig Dillenbeck, Aaron Durham, Gabrielle Knight, Lynn Rees-Jones, Christy Chanowski, and our moderator, Shauna Caldwell. It's now my pleasure to introduce our good friend, university colleague, and AMPC partner, Rich Campbell.
Thank you, Denise. It is a great honor to partner with you and your incredible team at the Turchin Center on this exhibition. Your department on campus is one of our most important partners, and we can't thank you enough for all of the support and creative collaborations over the years. My name is Rich Campbell, pronouns he, him, his, and I'm the Associate Director of Programs with University Recreation. Outdoor Programs with University Recreation is thrilled to host the Appalachian Mountain Photography Competition, AMPC, along with our friends and partners at the Turchin Center for the Visual Arts and Virtual Blue Ridge. The AMPC was envisioned as a way to celebrate the people, places, and pursuits of the Southern Appalachians. It was intentionally created as an extension of the Banff Film Festival that, as a part of their world tour, brings mountain-themed films from across the globe to our mountain community every year. We wanted to give our local audiences a tangible way to participate in the themes of the film festival while celebrating the place we call home. In some ways, this pair of events is our effort at a global to local mountain-themed celebration of the arts, combining film and photography. We are now in our 18th year of the AMPC, and it may be one of the longest standing exhibitions at the Turchin Center. This year, we received over 800 images that were submitted, and our jurors selected 51 finalist images to be included in this year's competition. Over the years, we've curated a juried, readily accessible gallery of all of the finalist images from all 18 years of the competition that we have hosted. We have numerous exhibition openings, award ceremonies, photography portfolio reviews, lunch and learn sessions, and now our first panel discussion. Thank you to each of the panelists for being here tonight. I would like to introduce one of the jurors this year, Shauna Caldwell, whose vision has brought us together with the panel this evening. Shauna currently works as Assistant Director of Arts Education and Outreach at the Turchin Center. She's a practicing artist and photographer from Boone and has spent the past 3 years of her graduate coursework researching the contributions of women in the arts in Appalachia, specifically within the photographic medium. Her scholarly and artistic interest inspired her to organize this panel in order to expand the conversation about Appalachian photography and the critical role it plays in contemporary art and beyond. Thank you, Shauna.
Thanks so much, Rich, and thank you all for joining us for tonight's virtual panel about contemporary Appalachian photography. Like they said, I am Shauna Caldwell, and I will be moderating the conversation this evening. Behind the scenes are my colleagues, Lynn and Christy, and you may see them interacting through the chat throughout the event. And to orient you to the format of this panel, each artist will offer a brief presentation about their work, roughly 10 minutes in length, which will be followed by a conversational Q&A. So during the event, we invite you to submit questions through the chat feature, which will then be funneled to me to ask the artists. There is an option to turn on the auto caption transcription through the settings at the bottom of your screen. And we are still learning the ropes in the world of digitally presenting panel discussions. So we really appreciate your flexibility and your patience as we navigate this very new terrain. And before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that I am tuning in from the traditional territory of the Cherokee people, currently known as Boone, North Carolina. I am at home most of the time these days, but it is important for me to note that the Turchin Center, along with every other art center and museum in the United States that is not on a reservation or within an Indigenous sovereign nation, is on stolen land. And I want to honor and stand in solidarity with the Cherokee people who still exist and are a really valuable part of our community and are the traditional caretakers of this land. I think it's important to be aware of where we are and consistently be reminded of the story or the history of the land that we're on. And of course, the end goal of land acknowledgement initiatives is to get land back to those folks it was taken from, making this a lifelong commitment to continuing the conversation, asking questions, and standing up with Indigenous communities. So a couple of organizations to look to for more information about this are Seeding Sovereignty and Native Land, and we will put links to those resources in the chat for you. As both an artist and an Appalachian studies scholar with a background in art and art education, I have a particular interest in Appalachian photography and the visual narrative that it creates around such a highly politicized region. So it's been an honor to dream up what a conversation about contemporary Appalachian photography might look like. And I'm really excited to dig into these ideas with such a powerfully radical and inspiring group of women who are doing incredible work in and about Appalachia. So tonight we have Clarissa Sligh, who is a national treasure whose artistic work expertly weaves the cultural, historical, and the personal and the political through her thoughtful work, as well as her way of really being a part of the earth she walks on. I think she will provide some inspiring insight to this conversation. We also have Lydia C., whose expertise in archiving and the function archives serve in their communities will provide a heartening perspective for how we can begin to think about the archive of the AMPC and the potential of expanding its horizons through future programming. Through photojournalism, landscape photography, and using photography as a catalyst for activism, Madison Long visualizes many facets of her life and community in Cherokee, North Carolina. Her perspective on employing a broader understanding of contemporary Appalachian photography, as well as how important it is to showcase the work and the voice of Indigenous creators, will be invaluable to this conversation. And last, but certainly not least, Megan King is on the review team for the Looking at Appalachia project, which is a crowdsourced photographic archive and exhibition showcasing the work of photographers from any Appalachian Regional Commission defined Appalachian County. Her relationship to the project, as well as her own really significant artistic contributions to Appalachian photography and her involvement in current Appalachian studies discourse, will inform a dialogue around the role of contemporary photography in the region. So thank you all so much for being a part of this dialogue with us. And I will go ahead and formally introduce Clarissa, who will share some more about her work with you. Clarissa Sligh makes photographic series, artist books, and text-based installations to explore constructions of history, identities, transformation, and change. Her work has been exhibited in numerous venues, including the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the George Eastman House in Rochester, and the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. Clarissa, I'll pass it off to you.
All right, thank you very much. The first piece that you're going to see is called The Dirt Book. I call it The Dirt Book. And I made it because I've lived in cities many times or many years. And when I returned to, when I came here to Asheville in 2008, I was very conscious of the land. And I think it's one of the reasons that I came, to be with the land and to walk on the land. My mother is from here, not from Asheville, she's from Hickory. And she moved to Northern Virginia, which is where I grew up. But as I was trying to find a place to be, for the rest of my life, I decided I would come back to where she was. And it's just simply amazing. I'm really, really interested in the land because when I go out, that's what I really feel connected to. Prior to now, I used to do more work about interactions with other people and about people's lives and about my life. But now I'm really, really interested in exploring the land and what it means to me to be on the land. And that's changing all the time. So this piece that's called Our Passage to Become Dirt Under Your Feet, because I'm an older woman, and I have many friends who are dying around now. I'm very conscious of that whole thing that they use when you go to funerals about ashes to ashes, dust to dust. So that's what I was kind of thinking about as I explored what the dirt was like here in this area. Next slide. This is a close-up of the cover. You can see it does have a texture of the dirt that I walk on. Next one. This is a photograph that I took not long after, I think in 2008, when there was a big, unexpectedly big snow here in Asheville. And I had these Lobi figures that I had brought back from Africa quite some time ago. And I was really connecting being partly African descent with being here in all that snow. So I was I really was drawn to putting these figures in the snow, which is what they would never be. Generally, they are burial figures. When people die, there's a figure that is carved to be placed on their burial site. And these are this image I'm using in this dirt book also. Next. So I made the book itself the structure is a modified, what they call a modified star structure. And next, please. And I was combining the whole idea or the concept of being on the land and the dirt and what one does, and making your mark and with mark making. I'm very, very interested in the whole idea of mark making because it's always different for everybody. And it's sort of like your handwriting when you are when you're writing your signature or you're writing a letter. I was very, very interested in that. Next. This is a close-up. A lot of books have, I was interested in the back side of the page as well as the front side of the page. And a lot of what I did for the inside or the other side of the page are like little worms and things, little plastic worms, making prints of those to combine with the photograph. So it's really a mixed media or multimedia type piece. Next. This is a view from the top. Next. The next few slides I'm going to show you are from a rose ceremony that was done maybe a couple of years ago here in our yard. My partner Kim's mother died, and we wanted to create a ceremony in honor of her. And we have created in the yard several areas that we call our more, not more spiritual, but more connected to the land, in a different way. and this is inside of a circle. Next slide, please. This is a close-up of it where we're using roses, and the stones are rose, except for one, are rose quartz. And the idea is to think about or to connect with the spirit of the environment, of the wind, of the space, of the land, of just of also the transience of our lives. So I'm going to show you a few close-ups next. This is as you can see, as the petals are dropped. Next, another close-ups. And you know, these really interest me because generally when I think of roses, the roses we grow are not, the petals are not this separate. But with this particular bunch, they were just really gorgeous. And the part of the idea was to also create like a trace. You know, as we walk on the land, we create a trace of who we are and what we're doing. Next. Okay. Next. You know, I've photographed a lot outside since I've been here, and that's the main way that my work has changed since I've been here. I just really have done a lot with close-ups of the land, and I probably will make a book from these roses because, you know, the book is my primary medium. Photography really is, but I'm always using creating a book because there's a way that people can take the book and bring it closer to who they are. The problem is trying to create enough books to get into the hands of enough people. Next. This is, you can see the close-up of the center of the piece. Next. Next. Okay, so that's it. But I primarily wanted to show you just two different ways that I work. And one is with the book format, and the other is just creating, just doing something on the land. Because the land, you know, for me is really very important. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Clarissa. That was beautiful. Next up, we have Lydia C., who works across fields as an artist, photographer, educator, curator, and serial collaborator, and is passionate about the uses of art for social justice and civic engagement. Working in the studio and with community, Lydia examines authorship, agency, and representation within the context of material culture. Pass it off to you.
Hi. Hi, I'm Lydia. I use she, they, and y'all pronouns. I am also coming to you from the ancestral lands of the Cherokee people. And I just want to say before I begin a few things. One, I am such a huge fan of all of the artists on this call, and I've taught each of you in my photo class. I haven't met Madison, but hi, it's nice to see you. And since this call, I have used some of your photographs in my class, but each one of you have been a part of my trying to expand the language of photography in Appalachia to my students who are making photography in Appalachia. And I'm just so moved and humbled to be here with all of you. Thank you. Okay. Let's do this. Folks have historically collected near bodies of water for access to resources, to food, to information, to trade. Access to fresh water is essential for survival. Most of the world is water. In the temperate rainforest of the Smoky Mountains, countless hollers, each with their own tributary, join in confluence with larger creeks and cricks, eventually flowing to nearby lakes and rivers. Each holler is connected to one another through these waterways, regardless of how far apart they are. The first settled civilizations developed in areas where bodies of fresh water made population growth possible. The Tuckasegee, the French Broad, the Little Tennessee, and other rivers meander through the Cherokee land of Western North Carolina. In rural Western North Carolina, as in many Appalachian areas, access to some resources is limited: affordable medical and dental care, fresh food and grocery stores, and cell and internet service. We can no more control availability of resources than we can control the ebb and flow of our waterways. In the Smoky Mountains, we don't dry out the same way other areas do in a drought. During drier times, we still wake up to misty wisps of moisture each morning, sometimes lasting until early midday. Our hollers are often shrouded in clouds by early evening. Our dwellings continue to be inescapable, susceptible to mold, but we are also vulnerable to drought. In 2016, wildfires in the area left 14 dead, nearly 75 injured, and 80,000 acres destroyed. But almost exactly 6 months ago, flash floods washed out the roads. This month, Jackson County is experiencing unusual to moderate drought, heading towards severe drought. Living in a rural floodplain is an exercise in acknowledging the liminal space between too much and not enough. By the time the most recent drought started, our household had been without internet service for 2 weeks, and it would be 2 more before our service was restored. The service had been interrupted as the result of an electrical storm, which would be the last significant rain for nearly a month. North Carolina is the 14th most connected state, as defined based on the percentage of the population with access to 25 plus megabytes per second of wired broadband, with 10% of the population qualified as underserved. The internet, unlike the clouds that cling to our hollers, is a solid, tangible resource which requires intricate infrastructure. Since 2011, access to wired connection of at least 10 megabytes per second has improved, and yet, while there are a total of 171 internet providers in North Carolina, there are 914,000 people in North Carolina that have access to only one wired provider, leaving them no options to switch based on cost or service quality, and an additional 125,000 people in North Carolina who have 0 wired internet providers available where they live. In Sylva, where I live, located along the Tuckasegee River, it is the second least covered city of 200 North Carolina cities, with 41% of the population able to access broadband coverage. Tuckasegee, likely an anglicization of the Cherokee Daksii, or Turtle Place, is 60 miles of slow-flowing shallow water. When the Tuckasegee is low, fishing weirs, Uga Yatuni, are viewable, perhaps constructed by the Cherokee prior to colonization. Fishing is now a tourist draw. Western North Carolina has been a hub of water-based tourism for years: trout fishing, kayaking, hiking to waterfalls and swimming holes, and most recently, beer. But we are drowning in breweries, few of which contribute with tangible long-term benefits to the community. Asheville's revitalized South Slope has erased any trace of Black legacy in a historically Black neighborhood. In a recent article for the Asheville Blade on the Tourism Development Agency, which controls a budget of $25 million in hotel taxes, Amy Worthen writes, while communities throughout our area struggle with a lack of services, with being pushed out, the hotelier-led TDA markets Asheville to the white and rich. It is a major factor behind the rampant tourist growth that has cost us dearly. Responding to the City Council's recent passing of a year-long moratorium on hotel development, Worthen notes that locals rightly tied the TDA and the extractive hotel industry to woes with increasing segregation and other ills. The tourist industry is locally extractive, fueling ongoing displacement and segregation of people of color from our downtown Asheville neighborhoods, the rising cost of living in Western North Carolina, and the persistent lack of resources in our rural and impoverished communities. In their 2018 article, Power Lines, Broadband and Democracy in East Tennessee, author Katie Myers and photographer Lou Murray illuminated similar struggles in East Tennessee, examining internet access, extractive industry, and the effect on those who are committed to staying, thriving in their communities. The digital divide is both a symptom and an aggravating factor of economic inequality, said Myers. Appalachia is in crisis in many more forms than addressed here, opioids and substance abuse chief among them. 10 of the 13 states considered part of Appalachia have poverty rates over 14%. But Appalachia's crisis is not just tied to a lack of resources. It's also tied to a lack of representation. The internet is a vital conduit through which those living in isolated, impoverished communities may converge in shifting narratives dispersed about the region. Appalachia has historically been represented in stereotypical aspersions relating to its poverty. After Hillbilly Elegy was published, a deluge of responses poured out of Appalachia criticizing J.D. Vance's depiction of the region, including Appalachian Reckoning, which is a collection of essays, poetry, and images from 40 artists, poets, and activists, and What You Were Getting Wrong About Appalachia by Elizabeth Catt. Though access to resources and to one another in person may be limited now more than ever, the flow of information and connection offered by the internet across hollers, community to community, is vital for those who are geographically isolated. Appalachia, which has historically been rich with natural resources, is rife with recurring barriers to access, which have stripped and further isolated its populace. Kin to a floodplain, interjacent between abundance and scarcity, stuck between a rock and a hard place. Yet it is the folks who choose to stay, who rehydrate our parched hollers, who channel resources back into their communities, that we chart our course. While we may live on the wrong side of the river, the limited spotty internet we have enables us to connect with those many miles away in confluence, working towards collective liberation. And God willing and the creek don't rise, our cup will runneth over and our well will not run dry. So I published this piece on a website called Dilettante Army in late 2019. And when Shauna got in touch about this panel, I thought I was gonna tell y'all all about my work as an artist archivist and how deeply passionate I am about preserving legacies and engaging populations of folks who've been consistently left out of archival interpretation. But in our conversation, I remembered this body of work and had kind of forgotten about how it totally encapsulates everything I feel about living in this region. And I published it shortly before COVID started. And so when I was thinking about trying to share where I am in this weird space right now, I wanted to share that with y'all. And I'm so grateful to I've never performed anything like that before. So thank you for coming along that journey with me. It was terrifying. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lydia. That was gorgeous, and we really appreciate you sharing that with us. Next up, we have Megan King, who is an interdisciplinary artist from East Tennessee. She lives in Syracuse, New York, where she received her MFA in art photography from Syracuse University. King also holds a BFA in studio arts and a BA in Spanish from East Tennessee State University. King's work incorporates photography and fibers and explores social landscapes and representation through the veins of gender and class. King's work has been exhibited both nationally and internationally and is held in several collections, including the Special Collections Research Center at Syracuse University and the David M. Rubenstein Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Duke University. Her work has been reviewed in the Journal of Appalachian Studies and featured by numerous publications, including the Oxford American, NPR's Code Switch, and Politico magazine. King has served on the photo editorial board for Looking at Appalachia since 2014. Thank you, Megan. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So I'm just going to take us through a few of my projects and look at how Appalachia and women and representation are fairly constant in my work in different ways. And so this first project here is Hispanic Appalachia, which I began in 2011, which was an election year. And so of course there was a lot of political rhetoric around the area and new immigration. And so I began documenting what I was seeing, which was quite the opposite of the rhetoric. Next slide, please. And yeah, and so in my eyes, I was seeing things like my classmates. This is Frank and Eddie, 1 and 2. Yeah, so I was seeing things like my classmates and the jobs that they had and the ways their families operated, and the fact that they lived in the area for decades. You know, it wasn't specifically one thing, but of course, racism is racism. And so, you can go to the next slide, please. I was looking at the businesses and how they seamlessly kind of fit into the region, and how the families and the things that they were interested in and doing fit into the region so seamlessly. And next. Of course, they brought their own culture and vivacity to the region as well. And of course, we all know Mexican food. I think of it when I think of home as much as anything else. Next, please. And so I was also intrigued by some of the similarities between Appalachian culture and Hispanic culture, and the ways that we spent time together. I helped sew some of these aprons with my neighbor. And so things like crafts or food making, which is the next slide. And this idea of like community and the things that we come together around were all things that I wanted to document. And of course, those are also fairly universal concepts, but we also find ways to represent ourselves in those universals, right? Which, next, brings me to gonna start threading this into some of the rest of my work, just representation in general, and different ways of how we see ourselves in the world. Next. And lineage. And I began specifically thinking about lineage of women and our relationships to each other, and how we learn and feed off of each other. Next. So some of my earlier work, this was pre-Hispanic Appalachia, I was just learning photography, and my instinct was to photograph these women that I had known my entire life, who were at the ready to welcome me in and let me do whatever I wanted as far as making images. Next. And I mainly leaned towards this one woman who I called Granny, though not my grandmother. And I became really interested in just the way that she lived her life in this one house for her entire life, and what that kind of means, where everybody came to her rather than the opposite, you know, of her like moving somewhere else to build a life. And next. I just found her fascinating in the ways that she would collect things as well. And for most of my life, she was alone in this house, and everything was her way, and it was just, yeah, incredible. So next image. So another woman that I found myself photographing at a certain point was my mom's best friend, but after her death. Next. And I was making some of these images and found myself thinking about representation, specifically of women who don't fit any specific norm. And so my mom's friend specifically was single or unattached her entire life, as far as I knew. And that, wasn't the stereotype of what I was used to seeing or what I felt was expected of me, which as maybe a Southerner or an Appalachian, you're kind of fed these ideas that you should follow a certain path, right? And started recognizing these women around me who didn't do that and what their lives looked like. So next. And so I started thinking of different ways to visualize how you represent that. And so I shifted into using photography as well as fibers. And next. And also considering installation and more specifically how that affects the way we see things with lighting and placement. Next, as well as my relationship to fibers, as I've been sewing my whole life, and which I learned from my mother at like the age of 5. And then from my mom's friend, I also inherited a sewing machine. And so I'm just like thinking about these connections that I have with all these different women and how they're influencing the work that I'm making. Next. And so I was also interested in the photos that I was using, which were found photos primarily. And, images like this one, where there's like a peculiar expression on their face and how we don't get to know everything about what everything means. We can make assumptions, and of course we each make different assumptions from each other. Next. And in this one specifically, like you don't get to know everything that's happening in this art piece. Sorry. You can tell there's something on the back side, but you can't get around to the backside to see what's going on. Next. And so this is, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Another departure or another exploration of the abstract representation. And this case this is a quilt without an image on top. And we're on Do Not Disturb now. And with a space through the middle of it that you can walk all the way around, so it can stand freely in a room. Next. So then I kind of took this vein of abstracting what I was looking at a step further and started physically deconstructing or taking apart women's clothes specifically and stretching those out in a space. Next. And so I would stretch them in each space that I was putting the work in. And so also adapting to the space and thinking about this, like the tension that exists in the piece. And the tension that women are constantly holding between what's expected of us versus what might be better for us or what, is right for us, whatever. And next, for me specifically, thinking about Southern Appalachia in relation to that and those expectations and those tensions that build when you don't meet those expectations. And so these are just some details of some of those ways of stretching these pieces that were used. And then of course the image on the left is one that came loose that I found particularly compelling or as a more interesting part of the piece, as the pieces themselves change throughout the installations occasionally. And that's all.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Madison Hai Long, who is a North Carolina-based photographer that practices the art of visual narratives. Madison attended the Academy of Art University in San Francisco to study documentary photography. Inspired by landscape artists and painters throughout history, Madison has developed her own style and techniques of photography. Madison has recently been featured in the 400 Years Project Natives Photograph, as well as the New York Times. Go ahead whenever you're ready, Madison.
Thank you, Shauna. Wow, I'm kind of nervous now. Thank you for the kind words at the beginning. Wow. It's always like good to feel that same energy, you know? But yeah, my name is Madison. I am a Native American photographer. That's kind of like what I like to label myself as. But yeah, Shauna reached out to me and wanted me to show my photos with how I relate to Appalachian photography and Appalachian art itself. So I chose to do this piece I did a couple of years ago on the Dakota Access Pipeline. And yeah, we can start out. This is my friend Pishan holding sweetgrass. If you want to hit next, Shauna, please, thank you. And this was the main photo in the series, and this photo is entitled Behind Our Backs. Just to show like all the things that has been going on with Native American issues and like how, I don't really know how to explain it. Sorry guys, I'm a little nervous, but I kind of want my pictures to speak for itself. You know, I give it the title and people see that and they see the image, and hopefully they can take whatever that is, you know, and let them be aware of like Native American issues currently. If you want to hit next, here's another photo we did. If you want to hit next again, thank you. This is the same model. She actually went up there a lot to Standing Rock to do a lot of protesting. And I actually didn't get to go up there to Standing Rock, but I try to do with my photography, I try to make a statement. So, but yeah, I just wanted people to see this, to honestly remember what happened, and just to sort of give you an idea of the type of artwork I do. So if you want to hit next, this is the latest series I did with the 400 Years Project. This is entitled Cherokee Artisans, Contemporary Cherokee Artisans Defining Cherokee Culture. And I did this piece, if you want to hit next. I did this collection to show the misrepresentation of Native Americans in modern day. There's so many stereotypes still going around, and it's unbelievable to think, because you guys are obviously aware of the situations. But some people still believe in stereotypes. Next. And this is just to show, you know, like what real natives are doing right now, you know. They're just people in their houses still practicing artwork, and that's something that next makes indigenous peoples is the artwork that we've been practicing through thousands and thousands of years. And it's cool watching these artists, you know, bring in modern time media to show their culture and how they want their viewers to see it. Next. But I couldn't mention any of these artists yet, but this is Monk Walking Stick. He's a carver. And we took this photo underneath his girl's trampoline, just because, you know, he thought the lighting was cool. And I'm like, yeah, for sure. You know, I just want it to be so real, you know, just not very staged, but just like show the laid backness of what Native culture is. Next. This is a finger weaver, and this was taken in the Big Cove community. This girl right here, she's probably 19, I think, but she was raised on this, and this is just something she does daily, and this was out on her front porch, actually. Next. And this lady right here, this is with polymer clay, and masks is something that is big within all Native cultures, and they're sacred. Next. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I added another photo, but yeah, if you want to go back, please. Yeah, so I wanted to add her because she uses polymer clay, and typically with Cherokee culture, we would use river clay from the riverbeds, but she, likes to do modern things because she likes color, the vividness of all the colors she uses, but she uses actual horse hair for the hair of her masks. So I thought that was super cool. Next, and I think this is the last of the slide. This is Evan Mathis with his pucker toe moccasins. And I really wanted to add all these artists specifically because they are real well at modernizing our Cherokee culture. And I think that's something that I think the world needs to see. Me as a photographer, I think it's my duty to capture that. And as you guys too, the other photographers, I think we understand that how much a photo can create a mood and like a visual narrative that other people can relate to. And that's why I love photography so much. And it's cool showing the world what the Appalachian life is like. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Madison, and everyone. Thank you, Clarissa, Lydia, and Megan, for sharing your really inspiring work. I have prepared several questions for us to spark conversation, and some of them are a little more general and some are a little more pointed towards certain folks. But please feel free to jump in at any point if you think it applies to you or if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share. So all of you have this connection to Appalachia in some way or another, whether it's simply the fact that you live and make your work here, or that you make work about the region or your experience and understanding of that. And personally, I've felt kind of conflicted about what the term Appalachia can conjure for folks. And for a long time, even hesitated using it to describe my work because I didn't necessarily want to be associated with those stereotypes that do get superimposed on us. I've since come around to the idea that I am, and my work is Appalachian, and I feel really empowered to claim that identity for myself because I am a part of this place, and my voice is important and needed in order to shake those stereotypes up. Because, as I think we all know, Appalachia has been a place of diverse perspectives and experiences, and I think we need to take that space up to speak for ourselves. But I wonder, is Appalachia a descriptor or a cultural identity that you would personally claim? And do you see, your work engaging with a contemporary dialogue about Appalachia and sort of within that framework of a regional identity?
I feel like I kind of already touched on this a little bit, so I figured I would start being yes. And I think I'm very much the same way in that I didn't recognize it as a part of what I was making or why I was making it until like a few years ago, maybe, when I actually recognized how much of a influence it had in my work. And when I really leaned into that, it made a lot more sense to me. I'll let others chime in though.
Well, I'll go next. I personally have not really identified as being an Appalachian artist because I've lived in a number of places and I don't identify with those places in terms of how, what I'm doing in terms of my work. I can understand that a lot of people would like to, but when I lived in New York City, I didn't identify as a New York City artist, and I didn't really think my work had anything to do with being there. But, I know it does, but I don't consciously think of it as that because I'm not creating imagery that specifically is talking about that place in a descriptive kind of way. So I don't generally associate with identify with a region, although I love being usually where I am, and I am definitely grounded there. I think it does influence my work, but I don't put a label on it, not in general. Let me hear from the rest of you.
It's funny. I think what you just said, Clarissa, is really like I changed my bio recently to say I'm Northern by birth and Appalachian by choice.
I saw that.
And like I think like I was born just north of Boston in Massachusetts, but I feel so much more connected to the earth here, and your work on dirt really like spoke to that too, where it's a home in an embodied kind of way, but there's a rich conversation, especially where I am in Silva and in Asheville as well, about like local, like what is a local identity? How do you achieve being able to say you're from here? And there are so few locals left in the region. And also when it comes to issues of, say, pulling down a Confederate monument that's on the steps of the library / former courthouse in Silva, one of the biggest arguments is like, well, all the people calling for this monument to be taken down are not from here. Mm. What do we consider a foundational home? Does it require generations? Does it require self-identification? Does it just require calling a place a home and then you're from there? And I think I feel about Appalachian maybe the way I feel about calling myself a woman, because like I'm like non-binary adjacent. I was just saying this to Shauna the other night on the phone, like I'm a woman. I'm proud of my womanhood and my femininity. I'm not proud of how our cultural concept of womanhood and femininity has changed my feelings about being a woman and what I feel and associate with femininity. And I feel the same way about Appalachia. I will always identify as an Appalachian. I will always defend my version of Appalachia, my version of femininity and womanhood. But I will also have a caveat of like, and what are you trying to impose on me because I have identified as that? Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing I find really interesting is that, my mother's from here. And I discovered when I came here to live that I'd always been here through her because she has a certain softness and she has a certain way of being that was always different from most of the people that I grew up with and their families. So when I came back, I say I came back because I felt like I realized that I had always been here some kind of way. And when I go out on the trails and when I'm walking, it just feels so familiar to me. So I just find that really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think that is gorgeous. Thank you all. And kind of related to that, what do you think Appalachian photography means? What does it mean to you? And why would you choose to connect to that, and maybe why not?
I don't think I was that body of photographs that I shared with y'all was the first time that I ever made work that I realized was about place when I was making it. Like, I don't think I ever listening to you speak about like your navigation of place through relationships with people was really like eye-opening to me, because that's such a like an intimate point of entry. I don't think I realized I was doing it until I had already been doing it. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I feel like I relate to that a lot. I did not realize that I was making pictures, in my own photographic work, that it took me a long time to come around to the idea that I was making work about place and that I was connected to this place in a really interesting way. It looks like we have a question from the chat from Pradeep Mald, and they say, "Thank you everyone for this inspiring work and your lovely presentations. All of your works seem sensitively centered around community and highlight both their needs and challenges. What advice would you give to young artists wanting to make work with and for communities? How can their work become part of an activist dynamic? It's a big question.
With and for. I mean, I kind of think some of it's just ripping off the Band-Aid and jumping in and, you know, knowing what you want out of it. So, you know, why do you want to work with a specific community? What are you hoping they get out of it? And then it sounds maybe more like you're interested in, or you want them to be interested in, some sort of collaboration more than a service. But it also sounds like somewhat connected, right? And there's always this like conversation around entry points in photography and purpose and intention.
I think you also have to realize that whatever you do and however you are in that community, it's also about you, because you have to come from you. So, and what you're doing is you're reaching out and you're sharing. But no matter, you know, what community you're in or how long you're there, it still is coming from who you are. So, and I think that that's what you have to do. I mean, I photographed a lot of people here in Asheville, but it's always about my relationship or my trying to communicate with them some kind of way, or trying to get them to communicate with me some kind of way. So I think it's always in some way about you.
Mm-hmm. I did this really amazing workshop a couple years ago with the C4 initiative in Atlanta. It was called like the Hatch Artists Working with Communities thing. It was like anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, I'm just shouting out C4 because they're wonderful. But one of the philosophies that they encourage artists who wish to work with community is just to remember it's always with, not for or to. That we are never, we don't have the agency to do things to a community or for a community or on behalf of a community, even a community that we are part of, right? Especially within our own lived experience, but that the with is like the really important part. And I think also there's a lot of trust that has been violated, especially like from an archival perspective and a history perspective. There's a massive lack of representation across all fields, and photography is both inherently problematic in that way and also kind of the one of the paths to wider representation, right? To adding agency or to expanding agency maybe. But like building trust within community isn't something that can happen transactionally just because of a public project that someone wants to do or a photo series that someone wants to do. It's there are so many more relationships that rely on long-term trust over time, and specific. Like I'm doing a project right now in a library, and the artist that I'm working with is a young Black woman who has never seen people that look like her represented in archival collections before, and didn't even know that we had an archival collection in Asheville that celebrated the Black historic legacy of Asheville. So it's that first step of like building trust and shared capacity, and then doing with, you know, or yeah, in a co-creative way, I guess, maybe.
Well, you know, I think what you're saying is true, but I also think you can do a project with community that doesn't, let's put it this way. Let's say you weren't trying to create a project where you were necessarily bringing in voice. And that issue of trust is always there. For example, you could have a project where you were just shooting people that you met on the street that you would never see again. And that's still a type of community. That's a way of communicating. And there are a lot of people that will trust you with that. So I think it just depends on how you approach it and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, we're all. Megan, do you have something to add? Okay. These are all really lovely responses and really thought-provoking ways to think about making images with, or, starting to make images like that with community. We have a question from Heather Waldrop for Lydia. She says, you addressed this somewhat, but I think often about Appalachia and especially the Smokies as being a place marked by multiple layers of colonization, from Indian removal and settler colonialism to 20th century industrialism, for example. While the Smokies are marketed as a crown jewel of the National Park Service and as sort of a southern Garden of Eden, the area was heavily logged and Lake Fontana was produced by a TVA dam built during World War II. Would you be willing to speak to these complex and layered histories of imperialism and the way they inform your work?
That's quite a question. I think you might break it down. Just give us just a few words. That's a thesis.
I don't think I can do that. I mean, I think you said in the question why that question is so difficult to unpack, right? Like we are so many levels deep within colonialization and imperialism. I will say Ariella Aisha Azoulay's book, is it Unlearning Imperialism? I have it like right there, but I can't see it. Hold on. Potential History, Unlearning Imperialism. This is amazing. And she also did I will always just like shout out other smarter women, like, because it's, if we do our jobs right, we get to keep each other after things like this, right? And we learn from each other. And then we say, oh, there's somebody else in my orbit that like totally is deeply involved in this work. And I'm like surface in that. But I am learning from reading her work. She did a podcast recently, and I'll try to find it maybe when Shauna sends out the follow-up email or something. But she's speaking about photography and photography's role in upholding imperialism. And her way around that in one particular instance was, instead of reproducing photographs in one of her books, the archive that she was trying to deal with wouldn't allow her to reproduce the images without including their very specific captions. And so instead of reproducing the photographs with their captions, she traced the photographs on tracing paper with a pencil and used those photographs in her book so that she could write her own captions and interpret the images in the way that was useful for her research without adhering to the kind of oppressive tactics of this particular archive to try to control the narrative. And so that's one of those, like, I am not a qualified, or maybe not, sure I could talk, yeah, I don't have anything of substantive like research or study to share, but my own work is learning from other people about how they have started to unpack these things, and then sitting with that for a while right now, before I do anything else with it. But it's a really good question. We should all be asking ourselves that always.
I agree. So I guess I have a question for Lydia, kind of following what you just said. How has your own work in archives in Western North Carolina informed your understanding of the region and the way we kind of collectively think about Appalachia? And everyone else, please feel free to jump in if you have thoughts about that too.
I didn't quite understand what you meant about how is your own work within the archives itself.
Yeah, Lydia does a lot of work through her organization, Engaging Collections, and I'm sure you can speak a little more to this about how you work in archives and are doing some stuff at the Buncombe County Library. I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit.
I mean, I can, but I'm so much more interested in what other people have to say. But I mean, the short version is like, we are always unlearning the version of history that we've been taught, and whether it's specifically about Appalachia or about women or anything. Like we have all learned a biased version of history in our own lived experiences. And anybody, any artist who is making art from their lived experience is an archivist, like full stop. As we all, whether we consider ourselves that way or not, and as we all make work and put it out into the world. I actually really loved, Clarissa, you said something about like one of the tasks of making books is making enough so that they can reach all the people that they need to go to. Mm-hmm. And like that's the thing. Like, how do artists act as cultural translators to get our work into the hands of the people that want to experience it with us? And archives and special collections are a really untapped resource, but also a way of democratizing access to cultural resources, like the artist book, like the photograph. It's all a very similar gesture of making, I guess. And I'm interested in working with artists and learning from artists who are either mining their own archives and their own lived experiences, sharing the stories of the legacies of people that came before them, which all of you all are doing, which is so really brilliant and exciting to see y'all doing that.
Can you repeat the question more specifically?
Yeah, my question was.
That was great, Lydia. Thank you. I just can't remember the exact question to like add on.
Right. I asked how working in archives informed Lydia's understanding of the region and kind of the way that we collectively think about Appalachia. And I think that could maybe go towards the way that you're working with archival images as well, Megan. Just this way of looking back at what we have. And I don't know if there's an attempt to sort of fill the gaps or expand on those stories in your own way.
Yeah, and that work specifically, that's kind of like exactly what I was trying to do, is to take like something that you can't really explain with words, and then you essentially make a collection of other things that could do that for you. Or re-represent something that isn't represented in the mainstream, right? Such as like single women or unattached women, and like how we think about them, and how to represent them, and the different ways that, that could possibly go. And I dove into this, like these images that I was finding, which were surprisingly large collections of images of women in thrift stores. It was strange, but yeah. But I in your initial question, you said something about like looking at archives and what's like missing, and something in there like the gaps. And I was thinking specifically about looking at Appalachia and how like that, it's essentially a building archive. And that's something that we've been like thinking a lot about and dealing with like from early on. Of course, like it's still building and collecting. But we started, somebody like made a map recently, and I don't know if this is talk about this, but there it is, that like points to where, shows us exactly where all the images are that have been made thus far, and has been like a really insightful resource to look at exactly where there aren't images coming from, and what that means, and what we could potentially do about that, or, you know, in some other way. And which is like the part of the archive that I am interested in, is like the filling up the gaps and the questions of why things are the way they are, or why things are missing, and like what we can do to change that. Which is also exactly like what I was doing in my work, I guess. So my interest is fairly like one thing, just touches everything.
Right.
That there's a term in the library science world, archival silences. And it's the intentional or unintentional omissions that come up. So in a lot of family archives, often the matriarch is often not pictured because the matriarch is often the one making the pictures. So that's like a recurring archival silence in like family collections, and things like that, where, and obviously highly biased, racialized archival silences. There's also a, anyway.
Lydia, in your response a minute ago, you mentioned kind of taking and interpreting materials as artists and coming up with new visions for things. And Clarissa, I think your work is just such an amazing dedication to the power to transform concepts by taking materials that are so enmeshed with meaning, like from, you know, you're transforming hate, where you took these white supremacist manuals and folded them into paper cranes, which is this universal symbol of peace, to even your rose ceremony, where you deconstruct this symbol of love and fragility and pain and kind of turn it into this gorgeous space of honor and healing. And I think that's what you are really successful in making that through your work. And I wonder if you think that process is one that we might use to approach the idea of seeing Appalachia in a new way. You know, I can see that in each of your work, really, but I wonder if that resonates with you.
In order to, I guess my first thought is that I would really have to think about how I see the concept Appalachia. And I think I see it primarily, you know, one way is in the land and another way is with people. In either way, you have to do sort of like a collaboration and a coming to terms with the dynamics of it. So, you know, I just don't really know how to answer your question.
Yeah.
But, anyone else have a thought on that? But what's the question again?
I wonder if maybe if you might be willing to sort of unpack your process and how you come to the ways that you transform the materials and the concepts that you're working with.
Okay. First of all, I keep a journal. I write every day. I mean, every morning, pretty much before I get out of bed, you know, so that I can be sure to do it. And sometimes I just write on yellow pads, you know, just to write, because I don't really know where I'm going most of the time. I don't even know what I'm trying to do, you know, most of the time. So, you know, I guess I write to try to clarify that, of course, you can only get to where you want to go by doing the work itself, you know, the visual work itself. But sometimes, you know, well, most of the time I need a good direction, and the writing really helps me get there. Because it's so easy, you know, to repeat yourself over and over and over again. And I'm trying to not do that, to move along a path to try to open a new door. And it's not that easy to do, and especially when you've been doing one particular subject. Like, for example, for so long, I did work about my relationship to my family some kind of way. And then I did my relationship to the environment, that kind of thing. So I think that, well, for me, writing helps a lot. And it might for a lot of other people too. I would like to sit and maybe even talk with other people about where I think I'm going. And I'm hoping that I can form a relationship here so that sometimes we could talk with each other, because I think it helps a lot. But that's a great question.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So when you use like Dick and Jane, or like the materials they used in the paper cranes, how do you come across those things, and how do you know, like, I'm called to this story as opposed to any of these other things? Like,
Okay.
Yeah.
With the Dick and Jane is easy because I was doing, the answer is easy because I was doing early work called Reframing the Past, where I was reframing my relationship to who I was when I was very young, or who I came in contact with, or what I came in contact with. So I was reframing those narratives. Now the crane work came about really differently because I got this box, so I got this email from the Montana Human Rights Network, and one of the curators at the museum there in Helena wanted to do this show with different, like inviting artists to work with or comment with this white supremacist material. And I had no idea they were going to ship books, copies of white supremacist books, to my house. And when I got them, I was stunned. Actually, I was afraid of them, as objects. I was afraid of them. But I had to come to terms with, what can I possibly do with this or around this? And the first things I thought about were pretty mundane. But then in talking with Kim and some other friends, I realized that I could do something different than what I had done previously. And I had been to Japan, and I had seen, I've been to Hiroshima. And at Hiroshima, what you don't see that is not published about being in Hiroshima is that there's a children's monument. And people from around the world, especially school children, they send groups of over 1,000 paper cranes to be draped over that monument. And the Japanese, it gets overcrowded. So the people of Japan, they have an agency. They come and they take all those cranes and they save them and they store them somewhere. And people continue to send 1,000 cranes because of that folklore that if you fold 1,000 cranes, you will be granted your wish. So when I was trying to figure out what to do with the books, it came to me that I could fold cranes, except I did not know how to fold cranes. And so a friend said, "Oh, I'll show you how to do it." And she did. She began to show me how to do it, but I could never fold 1,000 cranes in time for this project to get done. So, I would fold them on the bus when I was going somewhere. I was folding them all the time, but it was a good exercise because people would say, "Well, what are you doing, and why are you doing that?" But I'm not a kind of person that is gregarious. I'm a very private, quiet person. So it was good for me to have to explain to people what I was trying to do. And they really wanted to know. So I said, I'm folding these pages from white supremacist books, you know, to try to create the energy, a positive energy coming out of this that would bring some peace and some, I don't know, love. And it was just the whole idea of having that conversation helped me. I mean, it helped me a lot, and it helped to keep me going. I didn't think it was something I could do, really. But then when I started doing it, it just kept coming and it just kept giving. And so even after I had made the piece to ship, I mean, when I hung it up, it was a mobile. When I hung it up, there were so many empty spaces that I had to like stay up all night, a couple of nights, just to fold more cranes. Let me tell you, you can really get involved in these projects and they can take you over. But yeah, that's how I did those two.
That is so amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. We have a couple of really awesome questions from Carrie Mae Weems to everyone. Is your work understood in the way you like? And how do you push the work forward? What do you want the work to do? And how do you want people to engage with your work?
Sorry, who did you say this question was from?
Carrie Mae Weems.
This was friend, you know. I'm trying to find.
When I'm making work, I'm communicating, you know, I'm just trying to see. I'm just trying to understand what it is I'm looking at. And then when I'm getting ready to put it out there, I'm trying to think about how can I communicate, or what am I communicating? It's more about reaching out and communicating. So I don't have a particular way to do that, but I just try to think of different ways or how to reach someone else, because everyone brings their experience, you know, to a situation or to a project, even after I do it. Even if I have the intention that it should do a particular thing, it may not do that at all. So I just have to, you know, I try to communicate, and if I can, I feel great.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always what I wanted to communicate. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, I know as far as creating for myself, I experiment a lot, try different things, and I kind of very much just go with what I feel like, sometimes forcing myself in directions, but I'm very much a go with the flow kind of person, because it tends to work out a little bit better when I'm not forcing myself in a direction. But as far as what I want the work to do, I definitely lean heavily towards representation in every spot of my work. I think even work that I've, you know, didn't touch on, I've made about Syracuse or other places, is, you know, still looking at something and, you know, how we see that and how we can change how we see that. I know for Hispanic Appalachia specifically, like it was 2011 in an election year, and from a conservative area and family even, and just like, you know, it was kind of like, hang on a second, like, this is definitely not what I'm seeing. And like, you know, so then presenting what I was seeing versus what was being said was what I was aiming to do. And it worked in a lot of ways. So do, you know, kind of to open up conversations. Like my parents both know this work, and my mom just said that she and my dad were arguing about it, which is not too surprising to me. But I guess that's I guess where my head is with most of my work, is how we see something and how we bring people into conversation about it. to broaden our ways of seeing.
Yeah, thank you. Lydia?
All of that. I mean, that's, yeah, I think it's, I never know. I never think anything I'm doing is gonna be able to hold a conversation when I start it. And I think I'm a deep enthusiast for other people's stories and magic and experiences. Like I'm a sponge. I'm so my favorite space is to just be able to listen to somebody talk about their lived experience or their grandmother, or actually, weirdly enough, this is Megan and I met many years ago and then re-met randomly in Syracuse in the
studio.
And like that moment has stuck with me over time, because at that time Megan was in grad school and was having all of these like tear your hair out moments about what is the work doing? What do I want the work to do? How do photography and fiber exist in this like fifth wave feminist conversation that we're having, right? And how do these images, like, how are they represented and how am I carrying these things? And now I'm like in a very similar place in my own work. And I think if the work can keep asking questions of me and of other people, it's less important to me that somebody looks at work that I've made with my family photos and reflects on what it might mean, but instead what their family photos mean to them, or what their version or iteration of that gesture is, and whatever they leave with is supposed to happen. I think I've gotten myself in trouble in the past when I've tried to assign too much of an experience or a meaning to work, and then like you get disappointed when people read it differently. But if you don't assign an arbitrary expectation and you just enter into it with the enthusiasm of not knowing, like the aggressive enthusiasm of it just being unknowable, then there's no way to disappoint yourself. I mean, there's always a way to disappoint yourself, but abstractly, it's a little bit easier to be untethered to a prescriptive like response or reaction to the work. Yeah, I want people to leave with more questions than they came in with. And I want people to mine their archives. Like I really want, especially artists, to like look at these materials with provenance, even if the materials themselves aren't, like the book or the print itself maybe isn't printed on family paper or whatever, but like the content of the work is self-referential. And I want everybody who sees Megan's work and everybody who sees Clarissa's work to say like, oh, what's my relationship with dirt? What's my relationship with the portraits of women that I see? What's my relationship with these things? And how does that mean inside me?
Yeah, thank you. We do have a question from Alicia Green in the chat, who was one of the winners of this year's competition for her great images of women skateboarding. Very cool in Zionville, which is not too far from where I am. But she is wondering how to get her work into the world. She says, I've had some singular images included in galleries, but it's not the full breadth of those certain projects. Do you all have advice or encouragement and sort of actionable steps to help those like me who want to get more work in front of people but don't know how to start?
Well, one thing you could do is you could send your portfolio to Lightwork. And
not over.
and just to get, maybe they can't do anything to help you, but if you could ask them to respond to it, that's one, or even to someone else or someone you're interested in getting to know or get. Yes. Yes. You can just ask different people. You don't have to wait for somebody to come and find you. That's not the way to do it. It could be your cousin. It could be, your minister. It could just ask different people.
Which you were just saying about, and I was thinking about too, because if you go to school for art and you're in this world of artists and professors and mentors, whatever, people who are constantly willing to give you feedback, the moment you leave that, it's
Yeah.
Where is that? What is that? And we were just talking about how hopefully after this, there's some connections made here where we can do that. And that's what it is. I mean, and when I was between schools, I remember anybody who musicians who were crashing on my couch, I'd be want to see my work, want to talk about this. I did not care who it was. It was anybody willing to look at it. Everybody has a different reaction and interest in the work too, and pulls out different things from their own lived experiences that help you see the world completely differently than, or the world, maybe the world too. Then they add something that you don't have in your own head.
Yeah. There are a lot of universities all over the country. Just call up somebody and say, look, I'm working on this project. Can I show you this? Da, 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 and let it go from there. Don't be attached to it too much.
That's it right there, though. Don't the attachment of the result is the thing that kills the spirit of trying to get the work out there, right? And so I tell my photo students, apply to everything you possibly can and expect to get rejected from everything, right?
Oh, yeah.
Especially free calls. Any free calls, scattershot it, get your work out there. Jasmine Wahi, who's the social polyblock social justice curator at the Bronx Museum, just did a talk here at Western, and she said that she sits on so many juries, and often even when artists aren't selected for the show, if she likes their work, she'll keep them in their pocket. She'll write their names down, she'll save their website, she'll follow them on Instagram. And then if she's putting a show together, maybe these people applied to a residency and they didn't get the residency, but she's doing a show about something entirely different. And she remembers that she's seen that portfolio somewhere totally different, and will just reach out to people. Free calls are amazing. And also if cost for applications are a barrier, you can always email the institution or the residency and say, I really want to apply to this and I can't afford it. And if they turn you down, you send them to us and we will go after them. Also, you never know who is going to do what, right? You don't know who you have shown a spirit of generosity or you have asked to look at your work and held community with, who will keep you in the back of their mind for something down the road. And we don't do this because we expect delayed gratification later. We do this because we want to amplify the powerful work being made around us, and know that just because sometimes the arts industrial complex doesn't make it very easy to get your work out there in the channels that you think will make your career, doesn't mean that you cannot invent your own channels. If there's not a seat at the table, you build your own table, right? And there are so many ways of getting your work seen by audiences that would benefit from seeing your work that you just, you don't know. You don't know yet until you know. So a spirit of generosity and enthusiasm, and cold call or cold email anybody you want, because the worst thing that can happen is they don't reply. That's really, there's no bad. Actually, the worst thing that can happen is they reply and they say leave me alone, but that's never happened to me, so.
Another thing you can do is just ask a couple of other people whose work you think is related to yours and do a show, do an online exhibit, just get your work out there with another group of people so that you're just not pushing yourself. And you never know who would take a look at that word. So just try different things.
That's the internet. The internet is apparently the internet's the place to be right now. So it's not like maybe 3 years ago, having an online only exhibition would have been taboo because, you know, well, why wouldn't you rent a gallery or rent a box truck, like rent a U-Haul truck and drive your photographs around, you know, like there's all these ways to do that in tangible space. In COVID world, the opportunities are limitless on the internet, and nobody is going to polarize you for doing an online exhibition in this cultural climate. So you can just do it.
That is all great advice. Thank you so much. I know we're running a little bit over time, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time here. But is there any last thoughts or anything that you didn't get to say that you wished you had the opportunity to?
I want to see people's work. I want to see more work.
Can we do a show? Can we turn this panel into, also, like, I just want to call out that Madison had some internet connectivity issues and disappeared, but I want to like just say Madison's name again and say that you were here with us even though you're not here with us, and we're gonna have to do this again some other time and maybe have a show or something together so that we can share this space with you. And obviously if your internet has cut off, you're not getting this message, but
It moved Madison, and Lynn and Christy have been working behind the scenes to try to get her back, but I think there is a little bit of connectivity issue or something. So we will send along her website and hope that you all learn more about her projects, and we'll get this recording to her as well. But we hope to do, you know, an interview or something with her later on and bring her back into this conversation because her work is really wonderful and needed. So thank you all so much. Clarissa, Lydia, Megan, this has been really amazing, and thank you for so graciously sharing your time and your work and your insights with us this evening. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. It's so nice to celebrate these really amazing artists and the Appalachian Mountain Photography Competition and really continue to cultivate community in these new ways. So be sure to check out our upcoming art talks on the Turchin Center's website. Christy will drop that link in the chat for you. And thank you again. Have a wonderful rest of your night, everybody.
Thank you for organizing it.
Yes, thank you, Shauna.